Welcome to It's a Woman's World, a show that discusses all topics from a woman's point of view. We believe all women should be treated with respect at all times and in all places. Hello, my name is Beverly Crosby. Welcome to It's a Woman's World. Today we're going to watch part 3 of the documentary that was produced for the Minnesota group of women who were part of a larger organization called WILPF. These women traveled to Beijing, China a number of years ago for an international conference. There they talked to many women from around the world about human rights issues, about their concerns and the problems that were affecting the women and the children. So this committee of women came back to Minnesota and they wondered how they could tell the stories, how they could have an impact and maybe make a change in society and even around the world. So they created an arts committee, and with arts being music, puppets, plays, and other forms, they created their stories. So today we're going to watch the last part of this documentary. Please join me.
When we're doing these hard projects, and how do we as Western white women talk about female genital mutilation, and how do we do that in a family friendly kind of setting? And Dorothy Crabb, who has since died, was a longtime theater person, and we educated ourselves on the subject and felt that it was an important subject, and then we wrestled with how to tell it, and then we would come, well, how do you tell the actual story? And in the story that the young women wrote us, there's a flashback. And so Dorothy came in one day and she said, "I've got it. We're going to do shadow puppets." But that working together always, that's the other main thing besides fun and food. That spark, that together we could take on these tough subjects and we could figure it out together. And so Dorothy had this brilliant idea, and then she had a committee and a community to help build on that creativity. And there aren't a whole lot of places that I am in my life that there's as much creativity as in the WILPF Arts Committee.
Part of the mission of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom has been, of course, to include women in decision-making, and especially in situations where we're talking about peace and negotiations. And part of this message is that women need to be at the table. And in 2000, the United Nations Security Council passed a resolution called Resolution 1325, which says that women need to be included in all these kinds of decisions that influence women and children all around the world, because women and children are often the victims of war and conflicts of all kinds. And so this is to show that women need to have a place at the tables. We worked with the Heart of the Beast Puppet and Mass Theater to make these puppets which represented women from different parts of the world who had been at the Beijing conference. They each talked about issues from their own country, which included trafficking of women and abortion and domestic violence, and then female genital mutilation. We also did a show where they had just come from their countries following the Beijing conference, and they had come to the Minnesota Metro branch to learn how a good functioning WILPF branch could work together. They are completing a declaration of peace for no more war in the world. Here on this board are part of Rosita Garcia's story, which she tells about the Clark Air Force Base closing. Her father was a mechanic there, lost his job, and her sister already gone to work on Fields Avenue where there's 500 bars and nightclubs, and she was thinking about going there. The United Women of Los Angeles was helping women like herself, and they helped her go to the Beijing conference. So that is one of the stories that we were telling with our puppets.
I guess as a convener, I never liked being in classrooms that were all drudgery. And so I didn't want to have this be drudgery in any sense, that this is life at work. This is happiness. This is feeling good about what we're doing.
This is the Shrine to the Feminine, and it was first created by two women from New York, and they brought pieces of it to Beijing and set it up, and it was sort of an oasis at the peace tent. It was a place where people could be creative and children could play with art materials, and where people could just kind of smile and be together. When we got back, the women from New York sent us a packet of some of the dolls from Beijing. This is one from Beijing, and this is one that was done by my granddaughter. 6 months after I returned from Beijing, I had an article in the newspaper, and it said I had over 250 dolls made by school children. So one of the ways I brought Beijing home was going out into the schools and talking to kids about global women's issues and global issues for girls. When we talk to kids, these aren't just for kids though, but when we talk about all the heavy things, all of the human rights abuses of women around the world, having an outlet for that, to channel it and to interiorize it and to ignite that spark of creativity, I think it brings the energy into the kids. And we've had lots of kids here and lots of grown-ups, and you can see how beautiful our dolls are. One of the biggest surprises for me, it has been that somehow we gravitated towards performance pieces.
Yes.
And I think that we're willing to do just about anything that it takes to get our message out.
That's right.
So we don't start with we're all going to be painters or filmmakers, or but we start with a project, with an idea, a concern, and then figure out how best to tell that. For instance, the water bottle band. The concern was plastic water bottles and just the water issues around conservation. And so we started playing water bottle bands, and people thought all these grandmas were pretty funny playing water bottles.
Well, we are fortunate here to have a women's drum center. And it's really a percussion center. And it's unusual because there are women of all ages and women who have always wanted to drum and never thought they could. Because somehow drumming became, which began as a woman's thing, became only for men. And so women were not steered into drumming. But drumming is probably the closest thing to being alive, because it is the heartbeat. And so that's what the drums play to start out with, the heartbeat. And when we go to places, when the Women's Drum Center goes and gives concerts and starts playing, who gets up to dance? Little kids, all the little children that are there, because it's born in us. It's part of being human to respond to this drumming. And so it's really, I think, very important thing, and the Women's Drum Center is doing remarkably well. Women are coming out of the trees with their drums to take part in it, and women of all ages.
Well, I think one of the important parts of this is that we saw the need for women to be involved in the management and use of water, as women are responsible for carrying water, getting it to their families throughout the world, and usually have not a voice in that management.
Much of the world's water is still carried not on pipes, but on the backs of girls and of women.
And that girls typically are not able to go to school because they are needed at home to carry water.
And here at home, the conservation issues around plastic bottles, and so we think that they should be made into musical instruments instead of buying them to drink water out of. So we used the water bottle band as part of the fun. We did some mild little lectures and took our program on women in spirituality and women in conservation out into the community, into schools and into churches. And we played our water bottle band. We marched in with all of us in our, and we got a lot of attention, and then we added the percussion with this percussion, and it was fun for all of us. The water bottle band turned into the Stirring the Waters band, and we added more instruments as we began to work more with Drumheart, one of the women's drum centers in the Twin Cities. After a while, that grew into another project, a very big project, when we did a collaboration with Women's Caucus for the Arts and the University of Minnesota Art Department.
Women and Water Rights, Rivers of Regeneration is the outcome of my bringing an Osher lifelong learning class to the Nash Art Gallery back 3 years before the project actually started. And the director was there, and I asked him, well, how do they do the shows? And how do you get to have a show here at the Nash Gallery, which is a gorgeous 5,000 square foot gallery on the campus on the West Bank? And so he said, well, it's mostly the staff and the students, but sometimes we do take projects from the community. And so that was my aha moment. And then Marilyn Cuneo and myself, we wrote this proposal, and it was accepted. And the Nash Gallery and the journey began. It was also the culmination of a 5-year immersion in the WILPF campaign to save the water, joining with our co-sponsors, the Department of Art, the University of Minnesota, and the Arts Committee of the Minnesota Metro WILPF. We then began the planning and preparing for this exciting exhibition of artworks by women artists that extended over 3 years of planning. The question of gender in relation to water was central to this exhibition. We had asked the artists to portray whatever aspect of their personal relationship with water might have been, whether spiritual, cultural, social, scientific, political, economic, or emotional. We had assembled a vast array of events to accompany the art during the 5 weeks of the original exhibition, and all of which suggested, explained, and discussed why it is important to empower women and to educate girls to participate equally with men in the control and management of water in their communities.
This is a wonderful piece of the art exhibit at the Nash Gallery where we honored these women who have really been some of the leading voices around the world. The most famous of all of these women is Vandana Shiva from India, who's probably working the longest and is best known throughout the world for her work. And she was actually one of our speakers with the art exhibit at the Nash Gallery.
This exhibition was called Women and Water Rights, Rivers of Regeneration, and some of it focused on the Mississippi as well. It was a major event, and it has gone into a traveling exhibition and has had 5 other venues and is now on its way to China and possibly Mexico. We had 3 or 4 major art exhibitions and several symposiums, an all-day youth symposium with kids with poetry and art, and wonderful music again with Janica Vandervelde.
The water project. That was probably the biggest one because it involved so many people, there were hundreds of performers, there were so many facets to it that it was almost impossible even to try to explain to people because there were so many elements. All the arts were involved, and we had I think it was 15 composers that worked on the project, and they developed a performance piece that was an hour long, and they were writing for other choirs. The Chaska High School Choir was one, Central High School Choir, the University Women's Choir actually performed pieces by high school students as well. The Perpich High School Choir. Anyway, there were literally hundreds of performers on stage for this. And all the work was original by students. And then the whole thing was choreographed and danced by the dance department at the Perpich School. My contribution came in the education piece, because this was now at a point in my teaching career where music technology had developed to the point where the students could actually create the music themselves. The students came in, they saw the exhibit at the Nash Gallery, and there was a poetry slam, and then there was the show itself. First, I want to thank the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom for their vision of a better world. It went from an instrumental piece about rain to a choral piece about rain, and then everybody moved in a circle, and the next choir came onto the stage, and then there was another instrumental piece about maybe, the mountain stream, an instrumental piece, and then a choral piece about the mountain stream. And so it proceeded in this circle around the whole hydrologic cycle. There was a lot of also exploration of ecology. The science department got involved, and the students learned about ecology and global water rights, what some of the issues were. And so there was quite a learning process for the students.
When she was done, she went off and she wrote this herself. This is her music, Water of Life. And she dedicated a movement to each of the women in the WILPF Arts Committee. How do we decide on a project? Talk a little bit about that process.
Oh, is it a process?
Is it?
That sounds so very formalized. Well, I think it's because we are hoping to be able to affect change in the society. And so what comes to us, we talk about and accept sometimes, and find something that we all like the idea of doing, and off we go. Well, that's going to take about 2 more years of our lives, and so we concentrate on that for 2 years, because mostly we don't know much about it when we start, and so we have to learn about it. And so in that sense, I often say that this arts committee is really a study club. It's like a book club or something, but much bigger than that. It goes way beyond a book club, but it's that kind of thing.
I think we're all very present to what is happening in the world, and so, as you said, if something comes up, and we think, oh, maybe that'll, work. So it's like they're there waiting to be noticed, for us to give our attention to, and then to get other people to give attention to these issues, water, violence, or whatever it is.
We start one place and end up someplace else. Who would have thought that Maryland would end up as on billboards and posters in the Atlanta airport and on San Francisco buses? This was a group called Trappings, or Two Women Working, and they were asking women to dress in the clothes that made them powerful and do interviews in circles of their friends. And Marilyn dressed as a woman in black, and they were so enamored of her story that she's become famous. Together.
Well, not through strength or power. Those were not the ways we chose to do things. In fact, we were, at the time, that was pretty much a question of discussion about not forming this committee like a normal committee, because the idea of having women's committee horizontal rather than vertical, as most committees were under the patriarchy. So we thought we would just not have any officers, not have any treasurers, unfortunately, not have any really restrictions. So we were just a group of people working on these subjects. And I think that's worked out really well for us. I don't know if it would for any group, but for the people who were in this group, I think it's wonderful, because everybody has a voice, everybody has a place, and sometimes we don't agree, but it's not anything that's going to break us up.
Yeah, I think the thing that connects all these projects is the Women's League, and especially their vision, because I was a facilitator of an idea that was started by them in all cases. And it's this larger vision that is so important, these larger issues that they bring to the forefront through their actions and through their engagement. Because they don't proselytize. They're about engagement and bringing people together through community, and giving everybody a voice and in the participation is so critical.
I became a global citizen. Okay, from eating meals with women from around the world and meetings with women from around the world and other events that happened, and even the NGO forum, which was a complete milieu of international women. But I think it was the one-on-one discussions with them on the train when we were either in parks or meetings or eating lunch together that really made the difference in me seeing a broader way of thinking than just one country.
When I was just in graduate school at the University of Minnesota in social work, learning about community organization, the books had nothing to tell us, but for those of us who didn't know how to protest, we didn't know how to talk to strangers on the street, these were the women who taught us. They're WILPFers. Have you never heard of the WILPFers? Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. So I have held them in great esteem ever since, that they were the, well, as we say, the people on whose shoulders we stood, those of us who did any other trying to make our voices heard or learning how to deal with dissenting voices and make conversation, make contacts, and draw people in. They were the solid citizens.
And being involved with WILPF and the projects that I have, and going to Beijing has opened up a new world for me. And one thing I like that I've learned is that We all eat, sleep, breathe, love, cry, overcome obstacles and challenges, and we keep on moving forward.
I'm very indebted to them. And, you know, over the years as a teacher, we have used many of these projects as examples of how to do it in teaching. And I can tell you there are many examples of teachers that have said this has changed the way they teach, like learning about this project, seeing how it came to fruition. So the ripples from these projects continue to go out into the world and have an impact and change the way people engage in the world.
Well, I see that women already around the world are being loosed upon the world from all of the actions that have happened in the last 20 years. They are gaining confidence, and they're gaining more activities, and gives us more world backing. And the United Nations and all of these conferences and conferences at every level are all behind them. So I see the world really as well, it's kind of hokey to say a garden, but it's like seeds in the ground that you don't really see yet, or in blossoming and up where they're visible to everyone, but they're there. And that's what we can see by the work we do and the response we get from women. And women, once they have the confidence to act, the world will change. So that's what's being built, and support and confidence.